The new GTI has caught many high praises, but also a lot of sharp criticism since its debut not too long ago. However, I think the best way to get the GTI is to spend the least amount of money. Subscribe and hit the bell for notifications if you enjoy detailed, fun reviews on cars from every segment, new and used. Thank you. Now, I've already driven the GTI and I did a full comprehensive review of it with the 6-speed manual, so if you're more interested in that, you can check it out. However, I, like many other reviewers, was reviewing a more loaded spec. That model was around 36 grand. It was an SE, which I'll reacquaint you with the trims right now. So you'll have the S, the SE, and the Autobahn trim, which tops out around $40,000. The model that you see here today is $32,000, which is because of a few accessories and the additional paint cost. A manual is going to be about $800 cheaper than this. When it comes to differences in appearance, it's really not that many. I mean, here you're not going to have the light bar that was kind of cool to see on the SE trim that I had, but you'll still have the goofy signature fog lights down there. You'll still have LED daytime running lights and LED headlights, along with parking sensors, which is nice again because, like I said in the previous review, you're going to want to protect your $32,000 GTI. Now, I don't want to talk too much styling here, but personally, this look has grown on me. Whenever I first saw it, I was a bit turned off. I still think that the Golf R has a better front fascia without the signature lights there and a little bit less of this honeycomb look. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section. Right now, most new cars are a worse deal than paying 20 grand a year at a university to learn things that a YouTuber with a racing seat office chair could have taught you for free. However, Royal on the Eastside here in Bloomington, Indiana does not mark up any of their new cars. I'd also like to thank the friendly people there for letting me drive their GTI for this review. If you're looking for a new ride, check them out. Under the hood, we have the familiar VW Group 2-liter turbocharged iron block inline 4. You'll have 241 horsepower and 273 pound-feet of torque. To help access that power band and put it to the ground, you have a 7-speed dual clutch in the car that I'm driving right now. Funny shifter aside, it's a pretty good transmission, but I want to see the difference that it makes in a 0 to 60. When I tested the manual, it was damped, so I couldn't really hook up at all to do a 0 to 60, but it still managed a 6.8 second run, so I'm hoping that this will do a lot better. For this test, I'm going to shut off our climate control. The car is in sport mode along with the transmission, and we're going to shut off the traction control. This has launch control, so we'll see how that does. That's impressive. That is very impressive. Now, there's still a little bit of wheel spin there, and so 0 to 60 actually came up in about 6 seconds flat, which is notably slower than the 5.1 to 5.4 seconds I've seen reported for this car. I only do one run to keep it authentic. This felt okay in the moment, but I might have been able to shave a few tenths with another go. I think the main limitation here is the tires. Grip was so poor off the line that my 160 horsepower manual 4,000 pound Tacoma was a hair quicker to 20 miles per hour. Most of these press cars have the Autobahn wheels, which have summer tires, not all seasons like the S and SE would have otherwise. A Golf R with all-wheel drive, the dual clutch and launch control could humiliate any manual driver, mainly because it can perfect a launch every time with all of the traction it needs. Front-wheel drive with all-season tires on real roads is not a good recipe. I don't think the difference in 0 to 60 would be huge between manual and auto here for that reason. Past 20, this is a rocket ship. The shift speed here is lightning quick and surprisingly smooth when not hooning it too. Around the side of the GTI, we'll have the same 18-inch wheels that were on the SE trim I test drove not too long ago. You'll also have the same sort of ground effects and the same spoiler, and of course that iconic badge integrated trunk release and real tailpipes, something that an Audi SQ5 can't even brag about. However, when it does come to features lost, you don't have the smart key entry here or proximity unlock and lock. And you also won't get the pano roof either, but the handling characteristics and powertrain make me forget about this. It doesn't sound too bad either with sport mode throwing in some burbles. when it comes to performance, you're largely not losing anything with the base model. You'll still have the VAQ limited slip differential. It's more of like an E-diff. What you lose out on, and this is something that I've never even driven, is the standard adaptive suspension that comes on the Autobahn trim. The Autobahn also has summer tires, whereas these just have all seasons. Yeah, the highway pulling power is immense. This just, especially with the dual clutch, just able to knock off those gears. It is truly, for $30-something thousand, a great experience. And above 5,000 RPMs, due to how a dual clutch pre-engages into the next gear, the transmission reacts to your shifts with an urgency akin to a cat hearing its automatic feeder in the morning. It's a reassuring car at speed too, since the steering isn't twitchy, with a quieter than expected ride too. This would be a decent cruiser, and the comfortable, practical cabin affirms this. For 2022, the interior of the GTI became much more minimalist than years past. Whether or not you like this, there are some really good highlights here that are worth sharing. Outside of one little hiccup here with a little rubber mat for the wireless charger peeling up, panel fit here is great, but the actual material choice in here doesn't reflect the price tag too well for upper trims. Here at around 31 or 32 grand, it's adequate, yet noticeably behind something like a Mazda 3 Turbo. But I do like the pops of color that they use. And of course, the steering wheel itself has a nice perforation to it, is really meaty and has a flat bottom. The steering wheel is even heated here on our base model. Plus you have standard ambient mood lighting in all GTIs. And the seats too are very comfortable. Even on this base model, you're going to have lumbar adjustment, which is great. They are heated too. These are the same from the SE. However, the thing that has me most excited about the base model is you have a physical volume and tune knob, and not those sliders that don't light up at night. You do still have to access the climate controls through tapping down here, but this does light up, and the screen is a little bit smaller than in the upper trim models too, but it still has a pretty good resolution, dark blacks, and a decent response time. The main complaint that I have from it is that it comes off a bit unintuitive, but it's funny how just adding those two dials have made it less infuriating. And I also can see some of the updates, like putting the traction control off button in the drop-down menu instead of looking through the brake settings. So it seems like VW is listening. Now the trade-off for this is you don't have wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, it's just wired. However, you still do have your wireless charger in here, which works pretty well. You still have a 7-speaker audio system that's reasonably powerful, but lacks the bass and clarity at higher volumes like what you get with the Harman Kardon system I tested in the SE trim. Just like humanity's demise in roughly 50 years, the base trim is not able to escape the technology, as we get the knobs back but still have these capacitive controls with haptic feedback that fall short of the functionality of real buttons on the steering wheel. For the most part, it gets the job done. It controls your standard digital gauge cluster. It has a great resolution. It's still ahead of what I would say most other brands are. The shifter here it exists. It's very stubby, but you know, it works well, and I guess it saves a lot of space. I kind of like that they put the engine stop-start button right next to it. It's overall something that does look goofy, but actually works pretty well. Now, a couple more notes before I hop in the back. You do have USB-C ports only in this car, and you do have decent storage in here. There's not very much of it, but it's well thought out. You have this really odd cup holder situation that has a button to deploy itself, but I like it because, you know, I can fit like a smaller cup here, or I can fit my 40-ounce Hydro Flask in this felt line door pocket that holds it pretty well. A lot of cars really can't say the same. Plus you have decent storage in your center console that is height adjustable. Now hopping into the back seat of the GTI, I have enough space back here even at 6'3". Yeah, my knees sit out to the side a little bit, but I have enough space for my feet to go underneath the seat. I have enough headroom, more than enough headroom really. Plus I have my rear seat vents with USB-C ports and soft touch elbow rests, which you'll obviously have up front, but you do have a center armrest as well, along with two interesting little pockets here. Now I've already subjected myself to sitting in the back of the GTI, and yeah, I can fit. It doesn't have a super slopey roofline, so even though it is very short, it still has enough space back here in the trunk for a vacation. Plus, even our S model here does have a little center pass-through, and the seats do obviously fold down, so not only is it large, it's pretty practical as well, since this has a low floor too. Now on a back road here with our 18-inch wheels, this handles just fine. I mean, it's noticeably more harsh than the Audi A4 that I recently drove, as you would expect. This is a sport-tuned suspension. Ooh, now that was a larger one that I couldn't even really see. And you know what? Handled pretty well. This road has definitely deteriorated in the past couple of months. And I think the GTI is up to the task. And just like the last one I drove, it's also very composed. Even through imperfections and harsh pavement around tight corners, this stays poised and feels well controlled. And really, I got going at higher speeds in the manual model around wet corners, and you could kind of feel the rear end trying to step out if I was trail braking or something. And I really enjoyed it. The chassis here is very capable. Again, still a stiffer ride. Just because it's a GTI and it's more forgiving than a WRX, don't expect it to be an Audi. And when it comes to response of the DSG, it's quite good in sport mode. I think under most driving circumstances, it's not too eager to downshift, which to some of you might be a little annoying, especially in regular drive modes or the eco modes. You know, it will feel like it's lugging the engine. But the peak torque from 1750 RPM to 4000 keeps the GTI from feeling too labored by most tasks. Plus, gas mileage from this is good with either transmission. More importantly, it makes the advertised numbers on regular fuel, something not many of its competitors can brag about. But yeah, using these paddles, very good response time, very quick shifts. It's kind of cool to notice the different tuning on this transmission as I've driven the new Q5 and the new A4 pretty recently. This is just so obedient. It does what you tell it to do immediately. And the shifts too, even at lower speeds, are pretty smooth. I'm very impressed with the tuning of the DSG here. To the people out there that are, you know, scoffing at a $32,000 base GTI, I hear you, but really you should drive it before you jump to that conclusion. And around these nice corners, body roll for this tall of a vehicle is well kept. And when it comes to steering feedback, you know what, the steering is not completely dead. For the most part, you know, I wouldn't say it's more engaging than Mark 7, but the good news is that the steering has just as much life as it had before, and the previous car was regarded highly. The variable ratio steering seems to hit the sweet spot for this type of car, as it never comes off darty but can change direction rapidly in a precise manner. While I couldn't push this too far here, it feels like it would be more capable than the old car, and it's still just as engaging. Now, one thing I did notice in the last time when there was more slick roads out, the traction control system would actually turn back on after a certain amount of time and hooning it too much. So that's something that I think VW should work out in the software if they haven't already. I think it's a little bit too dry today for me to be able to tell if they fix that or not. And another thing that's a pro with the GTI is visibility. This being a hatchback, you have lower, larger windows. I can see out of this pretty well. It's not a daunting car to drive, especially with the DSG. It's just very easy for anyone to hop in and enjoy this performance. But is it easy for anyone to afford the upkeep? This is a new model, but the engine and transmission are the same and have been improved over its many years in service. The Mark 7 was reasonably dependable. A weak thermostat and coolant system can cause leaks, leaky sunroofs were a thing, some coil packs would fail from track driving, especially in high heat, and AC problems were present. But the most costly issue was related to the wastegate actuator. Some people lubed up the linkage and it was fine, but dealers will commonly just replace the turbo. It doesn't appear that most of these problems affected a majority of cars, but if reliability is a super high priority to you, none of the cars in the sport compact class have exactly stellar records. With that in mind and looking at the Mark 7, I would have no issues recommending the Mark 8 if reliability is something that's important to you. Just watch for carbon buildup on the intake valves and do the DSG service every 40,000 miles. Really, the only car in the class with a substantially better history is the Civic Si. Safety-wise, this has autonomous braking with an emergency pullover assist for the DSG. Adaptive cruise, lane assist, and blind spot monitoring with rear cross traffic alert are also standard on the base trim. Overall, I'm a manual transmission enthusiast. I've bought like 6 cars and 5 of them have been sticks. While I'd still probably choose the manual transmission GTI, there will be no shade thrown from me to the DSG buyer, because deep down I could just acknowledge that this is a great transmission, you know, track times and numbers aside. And this is a spectacular configuration too. The S model does not sacrifice comfort or many convenient features to get you a price that's $5 grand cheaper than the next trim. Plus, the interior is less frustrating. At this price, it almost makes me think that they should offer an even more base version that, takes away things like the virtual cockpit, heated steering wheel, heated seats, just to make something that comes in more around the $27K mark. But if it's my money, choosing a GTI trim right now would be pretty easy. Where the choice becomes tricky is with the transmission. The dual clutch in here gives you second nature responses when pushing the car, and smooth shifting around town when you're laid back. Just like a good dog, it matches your energy. The manual has great feedback and resistance in the shifter and clutch pedal, so you can't go wrong either way. Let me know which configuration you would pick in the comments section. In any spec, the Mark 8 GTI is still a sport compact that doesn't sacrifice comfort or practicality while trying to put a smile on its driver's face. While the price can get steep, and I can't say VW nailed every design decision here, if you're looking for a fun car that you can happily live with day to day, the new GTI is among the best. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing, and I'll catch you in the next one.